All right, so we got a 2007 Honda Civic. Evidently was taken somewhere else, and they told her it needed ball joints or lower control arms. And from what I understand, it might have got bounced off a curb. So I'm not sure which side. I haven't really looked at it too close yet, but we're going to go ahead and put control arms on it. They sell the ball joints separately, which I would normally do. Just put them on separate. But since this car has been bounced off a curb possibly, we're just going to go ahead and get the control arm ball joint assembly together, which is not too much more expensive. I think it's about another 20 bucks for the control arm per side. And then I was pulling in, I noticed that it has a axle making a lot of noise on the passenger side. So I'm pretty sure we'll be doing that too. So anyway, we'll go through the steps of replacing the control arms on a 2007 Honda Civic and possibly a passenger side axle. Alright, so it's pretty straightforward on this. You just got the two bolts here, the ball joint bolt and then the sway bar. I already went ahead and doused this down with some lubricant. He wants me to try to save those sway bar links. Sometimes you can't save them. They're too rusty or whatever, but we're going to go ahead and try it. He doesn't want to spend the money, and I don't blame him, but sometimes you can't avoid that. So I went ahead and sprayed it down. I might heat it up a little, and then we'll try to get them off without damaging them. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is go after this bolt right here on the side. It's actually a nut. And see if we can get her loose without damaging it, and then we'll move on to the rest. Alright, so I already broke the rust loose with the impact, hit it with a 17mm socket, and kind of broke the rust loose with it. So now I got a 17mm wrench on it with a 3/8 impact, and I'm just going to go ahead and run this out the rest of the way, hopefully. There you go. So that's all there is. Well, I still got a little bit more, but it's almost off. So I run this off the rest of the way, and then we'll go after this ball joint nut and cotter pin. Alright, so we're going after this nut here. I'm looking through the viewfinder, it's kind of hard to... Anyway, get this cotter pin out, and then we'll get this nut out, and then we'll hit this thing with a pickle fork and separate. Since we're not going to reuse this ball joint, it's okay just to pickle fork that bad boy and get it loose. If we were going to reuse this ball joint, then we'd use the ball joint. I have OTC, a couple places people make ball joint removers that don't damage the boot here. But since we're not going to reuse it, we're just going to put a pickle fork in it and knock it out. So remove this cotter pin and remove this nut, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so all you want to do is get your pickle fork in between, you know, the spindle and the control arm. I already got it separated here. But you get it in there, and then you just beat it real hard right here until it pops. Usually only takes a couple, 2-3 good hits, and that'll separate. So now the only thing we have left is the two control arm bolts. There's one right here, and there's one right here. So anyway, we'll hit those next, and this thing should pull out of here. All right, so you got a 17mm bolt. Pretty long one. And then we got one more right here. And I doubt I'll be able to get the impact in there, so that's going to be the old-fashioned, using the old-fashioned muscle to do that one. Alright, so this one's a 15mm. I went ahead and broke it loose with a 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to try to get the Milwaukee on there. Well, so anyway, it's kind of coming loose and getting tight, coming loose and getting tight. So just use what you have. Like I said, I just used a 1/2 inch socket and a ratchet and broke it loose. So this one might take a little bit because it's kind of in an awkward spot, but it's not that bad. Alright, so I got both bolts out. See, what you want to do is lift your control arm up over this sway bar here and just kind of work its way out. You'll probably have to hold your strut assembly out of the way and then just kind of work it out. This way actually came out pretty easy. And the other advantage to buying the control arm over just the ball joint, because you can see here, ball joint comes out with just these 3 bolts. These are actually really easy to change if you just want to change just the ball joint. But if you have an older car, or it's got a decent amount of miles on it. One of the advantages of buying the control arm with the ball joint is you get new bushings, and you can see here on this bushing it's starting to rip. Yeah, right here it's starting to rip away right here. It's good, and then over here it's got a pretty good rip. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but the new control arm comes with all new bushings and everything, so it's not a bad idea to spend the extra couple of dollars and get the control arm if you have if your control arms are pretty old, you got a lot of miles on your car, because you will get new bushings and everything with it on top of the ball joint. So anyway, that's how to take it out. You can see I didn't mess with the axle or anything. So yeah, we're just I'm gonna go on the other side. I'm not gonna show that because it's exactly the same, and then once the new ones get here, we'll go through the process of putting them back together. And then, like I said, on the other side, we're going to do an axle on it, but I'll probably do a separate video on that. Anyway, so you can see here, that's the 2 points. And I'll get the new ones, and we'll start putting them back together on the bottom. All right, so we got the new arm. Got it here. You can see it's got all new bushings in it. New ball joint already comes pre-installed. Everything's ready to go. So just slide it back in there. Be mindful of where your sway bar arm is. It goes up through this hole right here, and just slide it in there. It might fight you a little bit. It might help to spray it down a little bit of oil or the bushing points, and slide it into there, and then we'll start the bolts. All right, once you get it lined back up, it might take a little finagling. Go ahead and start your bolts, and then you go ahead and run them down. Like I said, you might have, it's easier to oil up the mounting points a little bit, to slide a little easier, and then you know, you have to finagle a little bit, move your strut assembly out of the way and stuff like that to get it to line up. But once you get it lined up, go ahead and start the bolts and torque them down. And then we'll run a little extra torque on that one, and then we'll hit the next one. Go ahead and get your front one. Now on these, maybe not torque them all the way until you get your suspension loaded up on it, and then torque them the rest of the way. It just helps the bushing seat a little bit better. So I don't have them all the way torqued down, and I'll get the rest of the suspension back together and get it on the ground, then I'll do my final torque on these two bushings. Now, on these, it's probably not as important as some other control arms because of the way it goes up in there, but that one over there does rotate a little bit up and down. So it's always good to kind of load the suspension a little bit before you tighten those down too much. So anyway, I'll do that, and then we're gonna, next thing we'll do is put the ball joint into the spindle here. All right, so make sure your sway bar goes up into this hole before you go too far with the ball joint. Just make sure it's close to line up. Sometimes the sway bar get kind of hung up underneath here. And then pull your control arm down and just line it back up with the hole of your spindle and start the nut. So once you get started, go ahead and torque that down and put your cotter pin back in. All right, so once you get your sway link back into the mounting hole under here, go ahead and hold it with open end on the bolt, or the nut I mean, and then go ahead and run it down with whatever you have for the hex. I'm having trouble here because I'm trying to do everything one-handed. Alright, so sorry about that. And then just double check the torque on that, and then you're pretty much done with it. The only thing you'll have to do at this point is put your grease fitting in on the bottom of the ball joint, tighten it down. Don't over tighten these too much or you'll break them right off in the ball joint. Don't ask me how I know that. And then go ahead and grease it up until it starts to puff up a little bit, and you should be good to go on your control arms. Both sides are basically the same. The only difference really between the sides is on the passenger side, this bolt right here, you can probably get, I was able to get my impact, my small stubby impact in there to get it out, so it makes it a little bit quicker. But Yeah, anyway, so it's got all new bushings in it, new arm, and like I said, it was bounced off a curb possibly. So I don't know if it was. It didn't look like it was bent, but I don't know. But anyway, it's almost worth the extra $20 for these arms just for the new bushings. And yeah, just lube it up and good to go. I'm going to make another separate video on the axle, so look for that. But that's the lower control arms on the 2007 Honda Civic. I'm not sure the generations on these Civics, but they're all pretty similar probably. So anyway, I'm going to get this all back together, get this Hoopty back on the road. I'll see you on the next one, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.